Hey guys, I'm Jonas. Today we're going to be going over how to install the Kingzilla lift kit on your EZGO RXV. This lift kit was made to fit on the 2008 and newer EZGO RXVs. Now there will be some slight variations to the rear section of the lift, depending on what year your cart is and if it's gas or electric, but we'll be going over that later in this video. Now it doesn't matter which year or powertrain option you have, installing the front section of the lift kit is going to be the same. Now before installing any lift kit, it's always a good idea to go ahead and disconnect your battery. Now we'll jack up the front of the cart and remove both front tires. Next, we'll need to remove the cotter pin and the castle nut to remove the tie rod end from your spindle. Now we can remove the dust cover from your front hub using a flathead screwdriver. Then use a 24mm socket to remove the nut. Next, you'll want to loosen the 3 mounting bolts and remove your front bumper. Now that we've got our front bumper out of the way, the next thing we want to do is remove the spindle, shock, and A-arm all as one unit. Now to do this, we'll first want to remove our upper mounting bolt for the shock. Now on these particular carts, they have 2 nuts on the end of this bolt with a couple of washers as part of their front bumper mount. So we're going to first need to remove the first nut, the couple of washers, and then the second nut before we can actually pull that bolt out. And once we've got that bolt out, then we can go ahead and remove the 2 lower A-arm mounting bolts.
Right.
Then repeat this process on the other side. Now we're going to raise the lower section of your new front suspension up into place. Now use the large bolt, 2 washers, and nut to install in the center of that front suspension. Then install the 2 U-bolts that are included in your kit over the frame down into the front suspension. Install a washer and nut on each side. Now we can use a set of 24mm sockets to tighten your center bolt. Then use a 15mm socket to tighten the nut on the U-bolts. Make sure that you are tightening evenly from side to side. Now when you're trying to install your new upper A-arms, it's not uncommon for the tabs on our mounts to be bent a little bit. Now it's pretty easy to just straighten those out using a crescent wrench until you get your new A-arm to slide into place. Then install the hardware that we removed earlier. Next, we're ready to install our new spindle assembly. We're going to be using one of the longer bolts that was included with your kit in the bottom mounting hole. Now when installing our upper mounting bolt, you want to make sure that the angled part of the bracket is pointing towards the center of the cart. Then you're going to use one of the bolts provided in the kit. Now it is a good idea to go ahead and loosen our jam nut here and turn this top mount out a couple of turns. And that should get us fairly close to where our alignment needs to be. Then just leave that jam nut loose while you're getting your bolt installed. Now we can also go ahead and install the tie rod end into our new spindle. Now we're ready to install our new shock dampeners using the original bolt from our top mount and one of the short bolts provided in the kit for your bottom mount. Now we're ready to go ahead and tighten down all the hardware except your upper spindle mounting bolt. We will want to leave that loose for now until we get our alignment set. Now before reinstalling our hub, it's best to apply some grease to the shaft on your spindle to keep it from rusting. Then repeat all this on the other side. Now we can reinstall our front bumper and tighten down all 3 mounting bolts. Now we're ready to go ahead and get started working on the back of the cart. So the first thing we did was jack up the back of the cart and place jack stands underneath of the frame on both sides of the cart. Then we let the cart back down so it's sitting on those jack stands, but we left the jack underneath of the rear axle with just some light support on that axle. Then we went ahead and removed the rear tires on both sides. Now essentially what we're going to be doing back here is moving the axle from the top side of the leaf springs to the bottom side of the leaf springs. Now depending on what year your cart was and whether you have a gas or an electric cart, there is going to be some differences on what bracket that you have to use and the whole process that you'll go through to actually get this axle swapped over. Now that we've got the leaf spring removed from this side of the cart, I went ahead and loosened the U-bolts on the other side of the axle. So I didn't completely remove them from the leaf spring, just loosen the nuts on those U-bolts so I could go ahead and let my jack down so that this side of the axle would drop down. Now I've got room here to be able to reinstall my leaf spring above the axle. Now this is where we're going to have some more differences between the years of carts and whether you're gas or electric. Now if you have a 2008 up to 2014 roughly, gas or electric, you're going to be using this bracket to go back in on top of your axle between the axle and the leaf spring. Now when you install this bracket, the narrower side of the bracket is going to go towards the front of the cart. Now this cart that we're working on is a 2018 model. So we're going to be using this bracket, which basically has a larger hole on one side and a smaller hole on the other. Now on this particular axle, they have a bracket that was on the bottom side of the axle, and we just slide it off and flip it back over to the top side of the axle. Now that's what this is going to set on. Now we do have a bolt that needs to go in here that's going to help us with our alignment so that the bolt is going to stick down into this bracket, and then we have a tab up here on our leaf spring that this is going to sit in as well. Now that's going to help keep our axle in line. So we're going to go ahead and get the bolt installed in here, get this back installed, and then we can put in our new U-bolts. Now in this case, we are reusing the original bracket. Now if you have one of the older carts, you will be using the new bracket that comes in the kit. Now we'll just leave these U-bolts loose for now until we get the other side installed. Now when we're reinstalling these plates, we do have to swap these plates from side to side. You'll notice that this plate has just a little bit of a cup on each end. So if we install the one from the passenger side back over on top of our leaf spring, that cup is going to be making contact with our leaf spring. So if we take this one from the passenger side and install it over on the driver's side, and the one from our driver's side over here on the passenger, it's going to sit down on that leaf spring nice and flat. So we do need to swap these from driver to passenger and vice versa. Now you'll notice that these U-bolts come spread just a little bit too far apart to fit nicely up in those holes. So if you just squeeze them together a little bit, kind of straighten those out, they do slide up in there much easier. Now we'll go ahead and tighten down the mounting bolts for our leaf spring first. Then we'll go ahead and tighten down our U-bolts evenly from side to side. Now we can tighten down our shock mounting bolt. Now you're ready to reinstall your rear tires and take the cart down off the jack stands. So now that we've got our lift kit installed on the front and the back of the cart, the next thing we need to do is set up our alignment. Now the first step of doing that alignment is to get our camber adjusted correctly. Now the camber is the top to bottom adjustment of the tire. Our toe is front to back, camber is top to bottom. So we're going to start with that. Now the easiest way to do that is just have the cart parked on a nice flat level surface and use a carpenter square to put up against the edge of the tire. Now in this case, even though when we originally installed this A-arm, we screwed the top part of that A-arm out a little bit, but we still have a gap at the top of the tire. So I can about fit my finger in there, and the other side is almost exactly the same. So what we're going to do is jack up the front of the cart again and pull out that top mounting bolt that we left loose earlier and spin that top adjustment out a couple more turns. And we're going to do that on both sides. It is important when you're setting your camber that you are adjusting both sides at the same time. You don't want to do all your adjustment on one side and have the other side leaning a little bit, or something could be off over there. So we want to be adjusting both sides at the same time. Then we'll let the cart back down, and I like to rock the cart back and forth a little bit to get that suspension to settle, and then we can check it again. So now we've got our camber adjusted right where we want it. So when we put the square up here next to the tire, there's no gap at the top or the bottom of the square. So basically our camber is straight up and down, there's zero. Now with the camber set where we want it on both sides, we'll go ahead and tighten that upper A-arm mounting bolt that we've been removing to adjust. And we can also go ahead and tighten down that jam nut as well. Now our next step is going to be to adjust our toe. So the toe is the front to back adjustment of the tire. Now on lifted carts, I like to set the toe to 0 so we don't have any toe in or toe out. Now you may want to adjust that a little bit just depending on how your cart is actually driving. You could go anywhere from a 1/4 inch toed in to a 1/4 inch toed out. But for the most part, setting them at 0 is about the best for a lifted cart. Now to do that on this cart with these tires, we've got a nice center line in this tire to be able to measure off of. So we're just going to use a tape measure and measure from the center line of the tire across the front from one tire to the other, and then do the same thing on the back and see what that measurement is. And like I said, we want to set it to 0. So our measurement on the front is going to be exactly the same as the measurement on the back. But before you start making those adjustments, you do want to take a look at your steering wheel. You want to set your steering wheel to centered and then adjust the tires to centered as well. So if you have one tire, the steering wheel is straight, and one tire looks pretty straight, but the other tire is kicked out quite a bit, well, make your adjustments on that tire first. Bring it back to center. But if you're pretty well even on both sides, like both tires are either out or both tires are in, then try to make roughly the same amount of adjustment on both tie rod ends to get the tires straight while your steering wheel stays straight as well. Now when you're ready to start making your adjustments for that toe, we're going to just loosen the jam nut on our tie rod end, and then we can twist that tie rod to either adjust the back side of the tire out or in, depending on which way we need to go. Now each time after you make an adjustment, you want to roll the cart forward before you check it again. On most carts, when you roll them backwards, the tires tend to toe in as they go back, and then when you drive the cart forward, they straighten back out. So whenever you're checking your toe, you want to make sure that the cart has been moved forward 10 or 15 feet even, and then stop and check that toe again. That's going to get you your most accurate toe measurement. Now that we've got our alignment all finished up, the next thing we want to do is just go through and do a nut and bolt check on everything that we just worked on. Make sure that all your hardware is tightened down. Now, the last thing that I recommend doing if you're installing a new set of tires and wheels on your cart is to check your tire pressure. We hear this over and over again. Guys will install a new set of tires on their cart and go drive it and say that it just rides terrible. A lot of times these tires will come at whatever pressure it took to get the bead to seat. So a lot of times that can be 25, 30, even 40 PSI. Now, if you have an electric cart, I recommend running your tire pressure down around that 16 to 18 PSI range. And if you have a gas cart, you really only need 12 to 14 PSI. Setting your tire pressures where they need to be will make a huge difference in the way that your cart rides and handles. Now, you guys can find these lift kits on our website at myperformx.com, and I'll leave a link for them in the description down below. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. If you got some good value out of this video, please hit that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.